Federalist 71, Part 2. I'll start with paragraph 2. There are some who would be inclined to regard the servile pliancy of the executive to a prevailing current, either in the community or in the legislature, as its best recommendation. But such men entertain very crude notions as well of the purposes for which government was instituted, as of the true means by which the public happiness may be promoted. The Republican principle demands that the deliberate sense of the community should govern the conduct of those to whom they entrust the management of their affairs. But it doesn't require an unqualified complacence to every sudden breeze of passion or to every transient impulse which the people may receive from the arts of men who flatter their prejudices to betray their interests. It is a just observation that the people commonly intend the public good. This often applies to their very errors, but their good sense would despise the adulators who should pretend that they always reason right about the means of promoting it. They know from experience that they sometimes err, and the wonder is that they so seldom err as they do, beset as they continually are by the wiles of parasites and sycophants, by the snares of the ambitious, the avaricious, the desperate, by the artifices of men who possess their confidence more than they deserve it, and those who seek to possess rather than to deserve it. When occasions present themselves in which the interests of the people are at variance with their inclination, it is the duty of the persons whom they have appointed to be the guardians of those interests to withstand the temporary delusion, in order to give them time and opportunity for more cool and sedate reflection. Instances might be cited in which a conduct of this kind has saved the people from the very fatal consequences of their own mistakes, and has procured lasting monuments of their gratitude to the men who had courage and magnanimity enough to serve them at the peril of their displeasure. So he says, this is one of the reasons that we want the president to serve for 4 years, not 1 or 2. Because if you let him serve for just 1 year, if people have got the wrong notions and they want their representatives to pass laws that in the long run would be to their disadvantage, the president serving for 1 year would say, why should I care? I'm going to be either leaving in 1 year and it's not my business. But what you want to do is give the president enough trust and enough political weight to say, no, I want the society to remember me by the good things I've done. I want to be able to tell the people that, no, right now this law is not good for you, and block it from passing, and in the long run they'll be happy with what I've done, what I've stood for, and they'll remember that maybe that day they were thinking with emotions rather than with reason and wisdom. So, he did not beat around the bush. He said that yes, you people are fountain of power in a Republican government, but as history has shown us, as we know how human beings behave, there are times that you're going to think with your emotions, let emotions take over, and want laws that are detrimental to your future happiness. That is where a strong executive with a veto power can say, no, this is not the way to go, and I'm willing to put my political reputation online. So this is one of those things that he actually tells people that you're either gullible or you can be gullible and be lied to and by people around you that are just wanting your vote. Next paragraph, but however inclined we might be to insist upon an unbounded complaisance in the executive to the inclinations of the people, we can with no propriety contend for like complaisance to the humors of the legislatures. Remember, it's not just the people that sometimes allow emotions to take over. Those emotions could be reflected actually in the legislature. And that's why you want a strong president, because in this system where we have separation of powers and checks and balances, you want the president to stop the legislature from enacting laws because somehow emotions have taken over in the part of the legislature, and they might just do the wrong thing. The latter may sometimes stand in opposition to the former, and at other times the people may be entirely neutral. In either's opposition, it is certainly desirable that the executive should be in a situation to dare to act his own opinion with vigor and decision. The next paragraph, the same rule which teaches the propriety of a partition between the various branches of power teaches us likewise that this partition ought to be so contrived as to render the one independent of the other. To what purpose separate the executive or the judiciary from the legislative, if both the executive and the judiciary are so constituted as to be at the absolute devotion of the legislative? Such a separation must be merely nominal and incapable of producing the ends for which it was established. It is one thing to be subordinate to the laws and another to be dependent on the legislative body. And he's reminding them that in republics, the tendency is for the legislative branch to amass power, to become stronger. So if you're talking about separation of powers and checks and balances, you better give the executive and the judiciary enough independence of will and action to be able to check the legislature, not to just be crumbled by it. You have to give, for example, the president the power to veto the legislation, or at least to threaten to veto it. You have to give him a 4-year term so that the legislature knows that this person is going to be around. So again, you want to have a vigorous presidency. The first comports with, the last violates. The fundamental principle of good government. I'm sorry, let me read this again. The first comports with, the last violates the fundamental principles of good government. And whatever may be the forms of the Constitution, unites all power in the same hands. The tendency of the legislative authority to absorb every other has been fully displayed and illustrated by examples in some preceding numbers. So in the past Federalist Papers, we've talked about how legislature tends to get really powerful. We've seen it in different states. The representatives of the people in a popular assembly seem sometimes to fancy that they are the people themselves and betray strong symptoms of impatience and disgust at the least sign of opposition from any other quarter. As if the exercise of its rights by either the executive or judiciary were a breach of their privilege and an outrage to their dignity. They often appear disposed to exert an imperious control over the other departments. And as they commonly have the people on their side, they always act with such momentum as to make it very difficult for the other members of the government to maintain the balance of the Constitution. So the president needs to have a 4-year term and also go up for re-election if you really want to balance the system. Because we know legislature has a tendency to amass power and act like they are the whole of government. They act like, well, people sent us here, so we got to do whatever people directly elected us, and we got to do exactly what people want, regardless of whether the people are making mistakes or not. So that's why you want a vigorous, energetic president to create a good balance in the system.